Okay, the last time I did this, I got really, really angry. So, do I really want to pop a blood vessel here? But I've got to listen to what my therapist is saying. Look at landscapes that you really like and read topics that you enjoy. That is the key to complete relaxation, right? Well, that's what she says anyway. So, yeah, this is beautiful. I love the Martian landscape. And let's read something from space.com. 5 ways to die on Mars. This isn't off to a good start. Let's see. Radiation exposure is among the top health risks for Mars astronauts. Okay, we're off to a whole line of BS, but wait a minute, I'm going to give it a chance here. Okay, so aside from radiation, what's it saying? The most immediate threat to human health on Mars is the low pressure of the planet's atmosphere. What? Okay. Quote, if you are unprotected on Mars, your blood would boil even at ambient temperature, unquote. Well, yeah, and if you stepped out an airlock on the ISS without a spacesuit, you would die too. And if you jumped out of an airplane at 40,000 feet, you probably wouldn't do very well either. I mean, what the hell are we talking about here? Okay, let's try this again. And by the way, they're quoting a planetary research scientist at the NASA Ames Institute. So, pretty much of a brainiac, I would think. So, he's got to know what he's talking about. Let's see here. The next thing on the list of things that will kill you on Mars is the carbon dioxide atmosphere. Quote, we need to breathe oxygen, unquote. Really? How shocking. Let's see what else he goes on to say. There's no free oxygen in the Martian atmosphere. You cannot breathe this gas. You would die of hypoxia within minutes. Is there a point to this article? All right, another one is dust. Mars is covered with toxic dust that is also finely grained and abrasive, and all of those traits are bad news for the human lungs. You would die over the course of weeks if you were exposed to Martian dust. But he doesn't really explain how you would be exposed to Martian dust, and also he doesn't bring up some of its most dangerous qualities, and dust storms for that matter. This is really incomplete and seems kind of useless, actually. Okay, now I knew this one was coming. Radiation. The lack of a global magnetic field on Mars, coupled with the planet's thin atmosphere, means that high-energy cosmic rays and solar particles shower the Martian surface. And then this guy says space radiation is mellow in some places on Mars. Really, it's not that bad? Well, that's actually true. We expect it to be higher where there's hydrogen near the ground. We expect, but we don't have any evidence for it. Okay, and in any case, it's something that over the course of months would end up killing you as well. Really? And what evidence do you have for that? Okay, screw this article. I've had enough of this nonsense. Let's move on to a different article. Okay, popular science isn't doing much good either. It's talking about oxygen toxicity in a closed environment and spontaneous explosions from pure oxygen and having to vent off the oxygen from the habitat to keep it from being toxic, and then saying things like significant technology development is required because the tech isn't there right now. The technologies needed for this habitat can work here on Earth, but in practical use in a space environment, it would require miniaturizing them, decreasing cost, and increasing their reliability. So how does all this stuff work on the ISS? How do they keep the oxygen safe and non-toxic there? And how has this technology been developed if it supposedly doesn't exist? Oh yeah, and by the way, this article also says that women shouldn't go to Mars because the radiation levels are too high and the risk of cancer is too high for women. All right, I've had enough of this. Let's talk about some real dangers for Martian colonists and debunk some of this nonsense, because I've had enough of this crap. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Angry Astronaut, and welcome to the new me. I hope all of you approve now that I've gotten rid of that ancient grizzle that's been on my face for a very long period of time. Not that I'm any less ancient as a result, but I hope that you approve of the new look. Okay, enough of that. So, you've probably been able to tell from the beginning, from the introduction of this video, that this is a topic that I have a lot of passion about. To rephrase, I get really, really pissed off about it. And that's the fact that there are so many dangers that experts tell us about when they're talking about colonizing Mars, or rather the absurdity of colonizing Mars, as most of them say, that really we shouldn't even try. Mars is just simply too unsuited to human life for us to even make the effort. And the dangers that they bring up, ironically enough, are the ones that aren't all that dangerous. The one, of course, that is the most common is radiation. Radiation, radiation, radiation. And I'll tell you something. After spending a whole lot of time studying the nature of radiation on the surface of Mars from instruments and information gathered for us by our probes, I have come to the conclusion that this is an overblown topic, completely ridiculous. And I think you probably were able to tell a little bit of that from the introduction. Yes, the radiation on Mars is significantly higher than it is on Earth, but it's significantly lower than it is on the moon. As a matter of fact, you could stand unprotected on the surface of Mars for years. Well, with the spacesuit, of course, but that's about it. For years, and only have a elevated risk of developing cancer. And by elevated, maybe a 5% chance of developing cancer by the end of your life. It's a ridiculously small risk compared to the real dangers that exist on Mars. And yes, there are dangers there. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Mars is beautifully suited for human colonization, because obviously it is not. We can't breathe the air. The temperature is oftentimes entirely too cold for us to survive. And there are things like planet-wide dust storms, which can be dangerous in ways that are seldom actually explained to us. Instead, they talk about blocking out solar energy and that sort of thing as being the greatest danger, whereas I'm here to tell you that that definitely is not the case. And that's only one of quite a number of dangers that exist on this alien world. But at the same time, there are many other so-called dangers that are easily rectified, easily guarded against, if we only have the common sense to do so. And solutions have already been presented, as you're about to see. So let's not tarry around any longer and keep looking at my new and odd-looking face. Let's get on with the topic. The dangers of the red planet and the exaggerated supposed dangers of the red planet that we can very easily survive if we just put our minds to it. Let's get on with it right now. Okay, let's go ahead and start out with what is supposedly the greatest, or one of the greatest, threats to future Martian colonists and explorers, and that's radiation. Because of the lack of a magnetic field, the concept is that Mars is continuously bombarded by deadly radiation and cosmic rays with absolutely nothing to stop it. And so it's like stepping into a nuclear reactor. And yet, we've determined that that's not the case at all. As a matter of fact, Mars does actually have the remnant of a magnetic field. It was 10 times stronger than we expected when the InSight lander set down on Mars 2 years ago. But years before InSight made these discoveries, the Curiosity rover made further discoveries and measurements about Martian radiation that frankly came as a complete surprise to a lot of people. The prevailing attitude was that because we were detecting certain levels of radiation in orbit, that it would be the same at the surface because the Martian atmosphere is so damn thin. Not true, Curiosity told us. In spite of the thinness of the Martian atmosphere, and perhaps the remnants of its magnetic field have something to do with this as well, the radiation levels were nowhere near as high as we expected. And actually, when Curiosity moved close to a cliff or something along those lines, the radiation levels dropped off drastically. So, with the aid of the Curiosity's instruments and in conjunction with orbiting spacecraft, we were able to create a much more accurate map of Martian radiation. And so here it is in all its deadly glory, and let's try to explain it in terms of that female we're saying that shouldn't go to Mars because it's too dangerous, and put her somewhere on the Martian surface and see how long she lasts. Now, NASA recommends a 175 REM limit for a 35-year-old woman over the course of her entire career. In this location, she'd be taking about 13 REMs per year, which means if she stayed there for 10 years unprotected, she would still not exceed her exposure limits. And that's if she didn't have any kind of habitat and nothing but a spacesuit. 10 years and she still wouldn't exceed her limit. Now, of course, if she was stupid enough to go to some of the red areas and stay unprotected for 10 years, she might go over her limit, but what does that really mean? Well, if she exceeds her limit, that actually is based on a maximum 3% lifetime excess risk of cancer mortality. 3%! You'd get a lot worse odds if you were a smoker. Now, of course, things like solar storms and coronal mass ejections might theoretically make things a lot worse for our lady astronaut, assuming that she was dumb enough to not have some sort of shelter available when these things occurred, which she would. And let me give you one quick example of that. Our not-so-dumb lady astronaut would spend a good chunk of her time in a place like this, the Martian X House, which won a contest sponsored by NASA for 3D printed structures. And this thing is about as radiation resistant as you can get without going meters and meters beneath the ground. This remarkable structure is built by robot and uses things like regolith-based concrete and also basaltic fiber, both of which are found on Mars for construction materials. The shape, as you can see, protects it from the sun's radiation, except when the sun is closest to the horizon, and there you get the maximum protection from the atmosphere. And then the exterior structure is very thorough in its protection. It's made of Martian regolith concrete, Martian basaltic fiber reinforcing it, expandable polyethylene foam, and a substance called HDPE, which is essentially Martian plastic made from locally gathered ethylene and methane. And on top of that, it has expandable polyethylene foam. And the windows, as you just saw, are pretty involved as well. The windows are constructed of primary and redundant pressure panes, which are 3 centimeters thick and made of in situ manufactured polycarbonate, and they're secured to the structure by HDPE frame bonds, which are also locally manufactured. And you're getting to watch the entire process as the robot builds this thing, windows and all, in a shape and structure that would give it the maximum amount of protection from radiation. Plus, the interior core, called the mechanical core, would serve as a radiation shelter in the event of an extreme radiation storm. A structure like this would provide almost complete protection from radiation, and then Our lady astronaut would also have a cumulative decade to spend on Mars otherwise. Not too bad at all. However, if our astronaut were caught in the open and saw this bearing down on her, she would have very good reason to be terrified. According to a study called Dust in the Atmosphere and Its Impact on Human Exploration by the NASA Engineering and Safety Center, dust storms, not just the dust, are a considerable threat to human exploration and colonization. You see, Martian dust is not just full of poisonous perchlorates, it's also electrostatically charged. As a matter of fact, our investigations of Martian regolith indicate that it is regularly struck by electrostatic discharges, essentially lightning as depicted here, and that could wreak havoc with our equipment on the Martian surface. The report describes the extreme problems that Apollo astronauts had with lunar dust, which is far less damaging, we think, than Martian dust, and the impact it had on their EVA suits to the point to where they could no longer carry out additional EVAs because of the dust. The report goes on to say, quote, "Abrasive properties of dust accumulating on surfaces and penetrating systems could lead to failure of air generation and delivery, carbon dioxide removal, fire detection causing false alarms and suppression, EVA suits, rovers, windows, visors, and optics. If critical life support systems completely fail, well, we know what the results of that are going to be." So here's my question. Which is worse? Something that might kill you with a 3% chance of you developing cancer later in life, or an electrostatic poisonous cloud that can cause your equipment to fail, especially if you're unlucky enough to get caught in the middle of it? And yet, what do the experts talk about? Not dust storms, they talk about radiation. Or if they do talk about dust storms, it's restricted to what it could do to the sun's light, on the impact on our solar panels, things like that, which could easily be dealt with nuclear power or hydrogen fuel cells, or solar power generated from orbit and transmitted to the ground via microwave, like I talked about in a previous episode. So many solutions to this problem, and the least of our worries when it comes to dust storms. And here's something else that would bother me a lot more than radiation: fresh meteorite impacts, and this is one that was found by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, nearly 50 meters across, and there's 2 of them, by the way, and they also found a bunch of smaller ones, as you can see there. A very potent threat. In fact, it is estimated that there's at least 200 fresh meteorite impacts on the Martian surface per year. Imagine what would happen to one of these habitation structures if one of these things hit it. It would be disastrous, the end for the colony, really, or at least for that particular structure. And yet, does this get talked about? Not at all. Now, these impacts can cause another dangerous phenomenon on Mars, which, again, none of the experts talk about, and these are Martian landslides. Unlike their terrestrial counterparts, these things can move at speeds of up to 360 kilometers an hour and continue for tens of kilometers. And we figure the reason for this is the lack of friction that exists in the Martian regolith. The less friction you have, the further the debris can go, and anything caught in the debris could be seriously damaged, and any damage to delicate life support equipment could be cataclysmic for a Martian settlement. Again, a threat that nobody talks about. Who gives a damn about radiation when we have things like this? And by the way, the experts do have a point when it comes to the hostile nature of the Martian environment, and therefore you need a really good environmental suit. something that's easy to move around in, something that's going to be form-fitting, something that's going to be less bulky and less likely to tear. And what I'm showing you right now is something called the biosuit, which was designed by MIT. This looks a lot different than your standard environmental suit, doesn't it? And of course, it would need an air supply and that sort of thing, but still, so much more efficient, so much easier to move around in, and therefore a lot less likely to end up in an accident. Look at the poor guy on the left, and if he tears his suit, he's got to rush back for help, whereas the biosuit is very, very easy to repair. This is something else we're going to need in order to survive on the red planet. And the last and possibly the most important factor is going to be the psychiatric nature, the mental well-being of the people who choose to live here. Since they're going to have to be living inside for much of their lives, their mental state is going to be preeminent. And in this particular case, this design called the Martia, that is very much taken into account. And by the way, I like these tall, slender structures because they're harder targets for meteorites. But that having been said, look at the interior views of the Martia. It's just beautiful, and with beauty comes psychiatric well-being. If you get to live in an environment like this, and on the occasions when you go outside, you get to see the gorgeous Martian landscape that you probably fell in love with when you were a kid dreaming about going to Mars. This is the sort of environment that's going to contribute to psychiatric well-being, which is going to be absolutely vital to the future of any Martian colony. They just simply will not survive unless they want to. Now, I'm confident that all the problems that I put forward here have solutions. When it comes to landslides, don't live in a landslide zone, which means we're really going to have an understanding of Martian geology. When it comes to dust storms, perhaps some sort of structure that can repel electrostatically charged dust, and maybe vehicles that do the same. Any problem can have a solution. But first, we have to identify it as a problem. Stop worrying about radiation and worry about the real problems. So, I hope this episode has shown all of you that although Mars is a very alien and dangerous world, it's not a world completely unsuitable for colonization. It's simply the kind of place that does have dangers. And some of them are dangers that we can't really do a whole lot about aside from simply avoiding them. But that doesn't mean that we can't live there. That doesn't mean that the notion of colonizing Mars is either impossible or impractical. And we need to dismiss these ideas because spreading out into the solar system, as Elon Musk has said time and again, is the only way that the human species is going to survive long term. Because eventually, as everyone knows, at some point or other, an extinction level event will strike this planet and end our species for good if we don't take the necessary precautions. Mars, to me anyway, seems like our best option, although there are other options throughout the solar system, and we should explore those as well. But Mars has its dangers. It's an alien world. It has unique dangers that we have never faced before. And some of these very probably will kill some of the colonists who set out to make a life on this planet. But then again, there are F5 tornadoes and incredibly powerful hurricanes and very powerful earthquakes on this planet that have ended people's lives as well. Does that mean that the Earth is not suitable for human habitation? Of course not. Every planet has its dangers. Every planet has its unique characteristics that make it dangerous. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible to live there or impossible to colonize. We simply need to use our innovation. We need to use our minds and our ability to counteract these problems or at least avoid them. And then we will be able to survive in the long term if we simply have the courage to do so. So, if you enjoy episodes like this, went a little bit more into depth, I think, this time on the dangers of Mars and the things that aren't quite so dangerous. I've done it before, but that was a long time ago and it wasn't greatly watched, not a lot of views. And I thought it was good to bring this topic up again. If you like to see these sorts of topics, and also if you want to see this mug get destroyed, because. Although I very much enjoy the coffee, I really want a different mug, and we are getting so close. 8,500 subscribers or so to go. Help me do it. Subscribe to this channel, like, and also if you want to support what I'm doing and keep this channel going, it's all in the description. There are many ways to support me, and I hope that you're able to, but if not, certainly a subscription or a like, it would be greatly appreciated regardless. So until we finally do have the courage and the innovation to overcome the dangers that the alien world of Mars has to present to us, until we are ready to confront the dangers of the red planet head on, because that's what's necessary for our species to survive in the long term, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.